Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to talk about how the plus 17 Stonevault was healed by a Mistweaver Monk. This spec has been on the rise and been under most people's radar for a little bit. And I want to tell you about how the rank 1 Mistweaver Spin God X on EU has been healing this crazy high-level content with the Master of Harmony hero talent. This hero talent was really rarely used in beta. It was actually just bugged in beta, but now it is here and doing immense amounts of damage. The entire focus of your Master of Harmony is that your healing spells are building up vitality, and you can use this vitality either for damage or for healing. It's all centered around your Thunder Focus Tea and your damage spells with Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, Rising Sun Kick for the next 10 seconds after a Thunder Focus Tea gets cast is going to put a damage over time effect on the target and then cleave onto other targets as well nearby. Or your healing spells, your direct healing spells, not really your hot ticks, but the direct heals on your allies are going to put a healing over time effect, taking advantage of that vitality. If you want to track Spin God X's vitality, you can see it just next to his potions in the bottom right corner of his screen. He has a couple other aura effects going on as well on his screen, with like eyebrow green lines in the middle of his screen representing his Blackout Kick stacks. And then the teardrops that are just to the top left and top right of his character are showing when he has the instant cast proc of Vivify. You can even see the cooldown in the bottom right with a timer showing when he's going to get his next Vivify available. On the middle right side, you can see when he has Ancient Teachings of the Monastery up, or now the Jadefire Teachings, where his single target damage converts into healing. And then right above his character, you're able to see the stacks of Jade Empowerment. This is the new talent in 1105, where after you cast a Thunder Focus Tea, your next Crackling Jade Lightning is doing 800% more damage and cleaving on to 4 additional enemies. This means after casting your Thunder Focus Tea, you can use this with the Jadefire Teachings to produce an insane amount of additional healing onto your allies. Basically just lay on hands in your entire party constantly as all these mobs are getting pulled in together. It's a huge benefit of Mistweaver right now, and it makes it one of the highest damage healers in the game. As Spin God is going into these pulls, he's keeping his Renewing Mist spread among his allies. He's activating his Jadefire Teachings to turn his damage into healing with the Jadefire Stomp, and not using any spinning crane kick whatsoever, and in fact focusing on keeping the Rising Sun Kick on cooldown, using Tiger Palm to build up stacks for Blackout Kick, which you could see from those eyebrow buffs that we mentioned around his character, spending it 4 stacks after 2 Tiger Palms to get a huge amount of Blackout Kick damage, reset the cooldown at a Rising Sun Kick, and extend your healing over time effects further and do even more damage. One of the biggest strengths of Mistweaver is they're so easy at mopping up really high damage trash pulls, and it's a big reason I've been a fan of the spec for such a long time, just like I've been a big fan of turn-based strategies really for a long time. And Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus, today's sponsor for our video, has really been scratching that itch for me as well. It is featuring a lot of quick, fast-paced, turn-based strategy where you're able to easily jump into some of the missions, complete them, and be able to change around your strategy almost every single time. Featuring some of the various heroes in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, there's a ton of additional abilities and tricks and synergies that you can work together to be able to go through the campaign. And on top of that, there's a crazy amount of game modes with the campaign itself, a mirror version of the campaign you can get into, PvP, and my personal favorite in Onslaught, where you're fighting wave after wave of enemy trying to survive and go for that perfect score. And now at the end of the year, they have a ton of rewards and events going on, with the Red Gobbo available with the code GROTMUS, and our code as well if you wanted to check out the game, and happy DEC, where you will receive 2,000 gold and 50 Blackstone to upgrade your characters and get them right into the action until January 1st. So be sure to check out Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus, and huge thank you to them for sponsoring this video. Going into EDNA, we really get a chance to see how you're going to set up your healing for some of these really difficult boss fights. Not having the Conduit of Celestial's cooldown from the hero talent can seem like it's more difficult for Mistweaver, but what Spin God actually ends up doing is super incredibly cool. Off the rip, they pop 2 of the spikes on Edna and then take advantage of the full stacks of Sheilun's Gift. This is a stacking buff that Mistweaver has that you are able to spend around every 30 seconds or so, but you can really use it at any stack level, usually around 10 stacks. But with how the fight ends up going, what we really end up seeing is that he's spending the Sheilun's Gifts at a small amount of stacks as they pop 1 spike on the first set. The next set of spikes comes around and they don't pop any of the spikes. And then the final smash comes down from the boss, and that is where we're going to see another cooldown being used, Thunder Focus Tea being used, and whatever available stacks there are going to be for the Sheilun's Gift. What results is in the following cycle, when they pop 1 more spike as the next round of spikes get spawned, then they're going to have like a 4 or 5 stack Sheiluns, and then he's focusing as much as he can on the Jadefire Teaching's damage to healing conversion to start pushing up health pools with that extra downtime that's going to be available at his disposal. There's a couple moments where they start kind of spreading around some of the different cooldowns they're using or popping a couple of spikes early. And the big reason for this is that Mistweaver is not as strong as a Discipline Priest for really high amounts of burst damage. And while the amount of vitality that you're providing to your team with the healing over time effect is very strong, it also is not very bursty. So in this situation, it's actually more beneficial for the team to really take advantage of popping a couple of spikes early on the Edna encounter rather than having a whole bunch of spikes, like 5 stacks of spikes going off all at the same time, like you might end up seeing with a Disc Priest. It's a really cool way of doing the fight. And there's a lot of cooldowns that Mistweaver is able to take advantage of, like Sheilun's Gift, like we mentioned, but also with Chi-Ji. The Celestial Chi-Ji is causing your damage effects to convert into additional healing off of kicking up these gusts of mist. On top of that, your damage effects are also allowing you to cast Enveloping Mist faster and for less mana. And when you cast Enveloping Mist, it provides the Enveloping Breath buff onto your allies, making them all take 10% more healing. So what Spin God is actually doing on the encounter is he is preemptively building up to 4 stacks of Blackout Kick with Tiger Palm. Then he's hitting his Chi-Ji in order to activate the buff. Then he's hitting the Blackout Kicks to both heal their allies through the Gust of Mist kick-up, and then get a max stack Enveloping Mist to cast on one of his allies, to spot heal them, to apply the Enveloping Breath buff onto his allies, to provide a bit more burst, and to make all of his healing that much more efficient. When it comes to his Thunder Focus Tea usage, you can see in like the middle bar that he has his Thunder Focus Tea cooldown set up. There's been some use on trash pulls where he's casting Thunder Focus Tea with Rising Sun Kick for additional damage, which also stacks up the Master of Harmony dot. But on a lot of boss fights, he's been using it pretty heavily on Enveloping Mist, which is another way that you could take advantage of it during your Celestial window if you wanted to, where you can instantly cast that Enveloping Mist and apply the Enveloping Breath from your Celestial, and all the healing that you're doing over the next 10 seconds, the direct healing you're doing to your allies, which also includes the cleave healing from your Vivifies, is going to be applying all of that vitality healing over time effects. And those are the huge ways that he's able to provide immense amounts of healing onto his allies as they're dealing with Edna. You might have noticed after they deal with the first boss that he is not using any of his lightning from the Jade Empowerment on the single target boss fight. I believe it's a little bit higher of a damage gain if you were to use it just for like the raw damage, but you really don't get much of any healing out of Jade Empowerment unless you're hitting 3 or more targets. You can have a cap of 5 enemies that you're striking. That also means as they go into the pull right after Edna that they're going to have the Despoiler to fight, and he has 2 stacks of that Jade Empowerment Lightning, which means he can so easily heal through that incoming damage because they're going to make sure there's at least 5 targets for him to hit. And once he has that Jade Teachings buff up, he is going to be able to convert so much of that damage into healing. It's a huge reason why when you play this build, 40 or 50% of your overall healing is going to be that Ancient Teachings healing. But it doesn't necessarily mean that some of like the Master of Harmony healing or your Shayloons is just not powerful. It's just that a lot of times on trash packs, your lightning is just going to carry the huge healing checks that you have on hand. As they set up to fight Skarmorak, it's important to note with the orbs on the encounter, if you're not as familiar with it, there's going to be orbs that the boss is going to be putting onto players' locations, which are going to increase the damage that you're dealing to Skarmorak only when he has the shield up, but they also will always be increasing your healing. At higher level keys, at honestly every key level, a healer should always be picking up at least a total of 2 orbs. You have 2 different waves of orbs before the fortified shell comes up from the boss, and so you have time to just grab your own orb every single time. At higher level keys, I've seen groups both have the healers run 2 or even 3 stacks, sometimes picking up somebody's additional buff if they had ever ended up needing it. Mistweaver is really easily able to pick up additional buffs if it's ever required because they're insanely tanky. By picking up these orbs, you are also going to be taking a little bit of additional damage, but for a Mistweaver, for example, where your stamina is increasing when you have the Jadefire Teachings buff available, your damage is converting into healing, and you're basically just constantly doing damage the entire time, it's very, very easy for you to be able to heal through any of the damage from popping these crystal shards, and the Mistweaver's toolkit in general always gives them something to produce large amounts of healing onto their team. When you have Shayloon's Gift able to stack up to max stacks, when you're able to just drop your Jadefire Teachings with your Jadefire Stomp, and then be able to hit your Celestial and start focusing on just damage and then setting up Enveloping Mist onto your allies for additional healing, it makes it so much easier to like muscle heal through this fight, even when the stacks are going to end up being a little bit lower. One of the biggest things that Spin God is doing on this encounter is he's sort of timing when to cast Shayloon's Gift for when there's going to be a larger burst of damage, because each pulse from the boss while the shell is up is going to increase the amount of damage that he deals to the rest of the group. So there's moments where he waits a little while before casting the Shayloons onto everybody for a huge hit, which might drop everybody to like 20%, and then he hits the Shayloons, lay on hands to the entire party, and then after around that time, that's where those shields are going to end up going down. One thing I haven't mentioned as we're almost halfway through the instance is mana, and Mistweaver thankfully doesn't really have to care about it. Even the moments where I've been playing and I'm like improperly using my Mana Tea since it only stacks up to 20, even in those moments where I'm just hitting the Mana Tea and I've forgotten about it a little bit, Mistweaver is insanely comfortable with their overall mana. You see a number of times where Spin God's running from one pull to the other. He might hit that Mana Tea, run into the next pull, and he will be totally fine for the rest of the encounter. It's a huge reason why the spec is so powerful right now is that they have a ton of output, and they're not as fixated on mana as some of the other healers in the game at the moment. After Skarmorak, there's an incredible amount of trash density, just a lot of mobs as you're going into the Forge Speaker next boss fight, and this is a huge area where, once again, Mistweaver shines. How Spin God is actually doing such an effective job of healing trash, especially when there's a lot of unpredictability, there's an insane amount of casters going into a lot of these pulls, is starting to spread out a lot of your cooldowns. We haven't mentioned Chi Burst yet, but it's really just a damage cooldown. You're able to pop it whenever there's a lot of mobs around, do a ton of damage on top of it. It's nice if you needed to reset your Jadefire Stomp, but it's often not needed. The biggest thing that you're going to see out of like high-end Mistweaver players is that they're going to spread out with using their Jade Lightning for certain periods, especially as they gather pulls together to provide immense amounts of healing to sort of even out health pools. So like if somebody gets meleeed or some casts go off onto people, they're going to be able to take care of it. Mistweaver is also insane for having like the Ring of Peace to start giving some extra separation for their tank when some of these engine speaker concussive smashes get a little bit too high onto players. But they're also really strong because when they have a lot of mobs around them, they have so many tools to just muscle heal through really heavy amounts of damage. Starting with the Jade Empowerment for the Jade Lightning, going into high cast of the Shayloon, high stacks, I should say, of the Shayloon's Gift, and as well as we've talked about before with the Chi-Ji Celestial, stacking up those Enveloping Breath casts onto your allies or the Enveloping Mist stacks, spending them onto your allies, applying Enveloping Breath to them, and being able to increase all the healing that they're going to be taking. and making it that much more easy to start muscle healing through the damage. I personally have been taking Soothing Mist for a lot of my runs in case I'm running into a situation where like a pug tank or one person is going to be taking really heavy hits and I need to like Soothing into Envelop into Vivify spam onto them if they're taking really heavy hits of damage. But there's a lot of times when you're on mass AoE pulls where timing your Jade Lightning hits actually makes things so much easier because you're going from those huge amounts of damage into another cooldown every single time to sort of muscle heal through that incoming damage. Going into the Forge Speaker boss, they are going to be pulling some of these engine speakers that don't really cast too terribly much damage and pulling those into the boss for additional cleave and for additional AoE. The most important part of this fight as a healer is always going to be the exhaust vents, and you can even see them taking advantage of Spatial Paradox from the Evoker, casting it on the monk so he can actually cast the Jade Lightning while he's shifting and moving into position as some of the other ads are dying. It's a really cool way of taking advantage of that cast on the move buff that an Evoker can actually give you. It's available to all Evokers now, but it used to only just be available to Augmentation, and it's a great way of saving cooldowns so that the next round of the Vent Flames, he can take advantage of Shayloons and a Thunder Focus Tea, and he can space out when he's going to use his Shayloon's Gift for another of those waves. These are huge cooldowns that can also be used so consistently for the spec, and so the better that you're able to sort of space all these abilities out, the easier of a time that you're going to have with a lot of your personal healing. There's also not nearly as much pressure to like push up health pools super incredibly fast after the cube is broken in the middle of the room, because there's not really that much damage going out after the fact. So what you'll often see is Shayloons or Revival or some of the major cooldowns not really being used at all after a cube break, but they're instead being utilized for the Vent Flames so that everyone is as healthy as they possibly can be, especially when they have to move all the way around the room for some of these positions. And then they're going to have just the light Vivify casts to start pushing up health bars, or even better, just allowing the Jadefire Teachings damage to healing conversion push up everybody's health. Once again, the Vent Flames is a great example of how the Master of Harmony hero talent is able to leverage that vitality resource that you're building up, and then being able to use the direct healing, even the invigorating mist, the Vivify Cleave, to be able to put healing over time effects on all of your allies very quickly, all at once, and produce an incredible amount of healing while you're moving, while you're shifting positions, and be able to keep everybody safe. In order to save time, they're taking advantage of a Shadow Meld skip for those honor guards that are guarding Void Speaker Eirich's room. They're tagging him with the Mistweaver. He's putting down his Transcendence so that he's able to run away from his Transcendence location, activate the Transcendence and kind of run around the guards, activate his Shadow Meld as a Night Elf, and then cause those guys to drop aggro while the rest of his team is able to run around him. There's a lot of these little skips in this season, whether you are a priest or a monk, to help your team out in skipping just a couple of mobs that take a really long time to kill. Void Speaker Eirich is absolutely the easiest of the boss fights in Stonevault, but there's actually some pretty cool Mistweaver tech that is featured here by Spin God. One of them is, of course, just the ridiculous amount of movement speed that monks are able to bring to the table with their roll and then their lighter than air talent that they received in the War Within, where they can just do an additional dash. On top of that, there's also some changes that have been made to some of the talents specifically for things like Soothing Mist. There's a talent with Soothing Mist which actually causes you and your target to take 6% less damage when you are channeling Soothing Mist. That means that for any really large AoE hits, Mistweaver can take advantage of channeling Soothing into their target, and then both them and their target are going to be taking quite a bit less damage. This is incredibly helpful for whenever the big bursts of damage are happening, for dropping some of the puddles all around the room, making it that much safer for the team. And this is a strategy that gets utilized really well throughout a lot of really high-end keys for Mistweaver Monks, and it's just a great way to make sure that one of the tankiest healers stays one of the tankiest healers throughout. Overall, for healing this fight, most of the time you're going to see the Thunder Focus Tea usage be focused on Rising Sun Kick as they stack that damage over time effect from the Harmony debuff onto the enemy. And you can see a number of moments where Jade Empowerment is being utilized just to leverage the single target damage that the lightning is going to be providing, because it doesn't really do that much healing on a single enemy. Huge thank you to SpinGodX and the crew for providing this footage of some of their high-end Mythic Plus runs. And big thank you to everybody for taking the time and being patient and checking this one out. Big love to our patrons for making all of this content possible. If you'd like to join them, check them out in the description down below. And if you'd like to check out today's sponsor in Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus, be sure to check out the QR link and check out our code HAPPYDEC for those additional in-game bonuses. Huge thank you to them for sponsoring the video. Thank you guys for tuning in and checking this out, and I'll catch you all next time.